Hey, have you ever wondered how BOU makes his mental foghorn bangers? Well, today I'm going to be showing you how he makes his hits like Nan Slapper and Magic Carpet. Welcome back to How to D&B with Inverse Audio. My name's Denver and I've got a banger for you today. Drop the video a like if you enjoy and leave a comment with what you'd like to see next, because I'm always interested. Thinking of doing a neuro video next, so if you've got any artists that you want me to spec into, leave them down in the comments. But without further ado, let's get straight into it. Let's do it. BOU's drums have their own characteristics, completely engulfing the old jump up harshness with its own twist of fat claps and snaps. This, paired with simple chunky hats and punchy kicks, give BOU's drums the characteristics they need. To achieve this, I will use the jump up section of our pack, picking out both a soft transient snare and a rough clap. I will send these all through one bus where I'll clip to add some subtle distortion. If you're interested in the drum and bass presets and samples used in today's video, check out the Inverse Audio Drum and Bass Sample Pack Volume 3. This pack contains 900 unique samples and 400 presets to improve your sound selection. We designed this pack to cover every corner of drum and bass, with foghorn basses to liquid reeses. Download it over at inverseaudio.co.uk. Cheers. So first we've got the drums. Really simple kick and clap pattern here. Only altered a few different hats, so we've got some variation here. Have this little like offbeat, almost sounds a bit like a ride, pan to the left at the end of each bar. That little effect. The normal hat we've got going on, it's actually two hats, one of which is pan to the left, one of which is pan to the right, and the out is turned up on the second hat. It's a bit like splashy, just because it goes well with these really like clipped hard drums. If you can hear that. The snare's comprised of two different things. I've got one that's a bit like a transient, and then the other is just a really fat clap, both from the pack. Down here is where I have a lot of like the loops going on. I have this bongo percussion type thing. Have this hat loop and another bongo loop going on. Don't know why, but I thought using a bongo loop would be a really good idea for this. And it does kind of work. It adds a lot of bounce into the drums, and it's something that BOU hasn't really played with. I just thought it'd be interesting to put something like that in there. In terms of like the mixing for the bongos and stuff, I used a transient shaper and put the sustain the whole way down, so that only kind of the attack of the bongos was being picked up, and then a Pro R to give it some room reverb. For these snares and the claps we've got over here, all I've got is some Pro R reverb again to make it sound like it's in a room. And some saturator. This is the U78 one. I think I managed to get for free from buying something or other. Pretty good saturator. Doesn't obviously need to be this one. Just brings out some of the depth in the clap that we could really use. But yeah, that's actually it for the drums. Usually for like processing something like this, I would just put a free clip on the bus. I wouldn't compress because the pattern isn't really complex enough and it doesn't really need it because everything's sitting where it is. You could saturate it, but if I'm clipping it, everything over 0 is going to be like almost pretty much, well, clipped, if that makes sense, which adds like almost like a fat kind of harmonic boost to everything. So we don't really need any distortion because that's doing it very heavily. But yeah, that's it, apart from this little hat loop down here, which is entered after this bit. Just another faster loop, sorry. But yeah, let's move on to the bass. If his drums aren't iconic enough, surely his bass sound design takes the win. BOU's most recent songs include short stabby jump up frog one-shots mixed with fat 808s or foghorns. His older style mainly incorporated longer form foghorns, which quickly became BOU's iconic marker. In this tune we'll use a mixture of both his old and new style. For the foghorn, I'll use my usual method of a resonant filter on FM synthesis and distortion. For the frog bass, I'll use a similar method but different wavetables such as acid to get a frog-like sound. Right, so for the bass, we've got two different sounds. First of which is this little like BOU jump up sound that he uses a lot in his new stuff. It's on my own twist on it, obviously. It doesn't sound exactly like his. But yeah, I'll just play the basses by themselves. Okay, so we've got some automation going on, which I'll show you just in 1 second. We'll break down the patches first. For this little like one-shot BOU grot thingamajig, I have one sine wave down 3 minus 3 octaves, and acid down -3 as well. Some FM from B, which is doing 49%, doing a lot. And the level of the white noise is also automated on this LFO at 1/16. Because it's an acid, it kind of like trembles. If that makes sense. Hold on, let me play it like this. Oh, that's a horrible sound. But it's like gives it a croaky effect. And that's purely because of this wavetable. And if you put the wavetable position up, I've got it at 200, it intensifies that. So you can get tons of sounds like that out of it. Without the peak filter on it, still sounds actually really similar. This this filter is just a resonance at, it's not doing too much, but the resonance is at 43, just adds a bit of tone to it. And I have this checked off, which means whatever note it plays, the resonance follows it in its corresponding note. On effects, we've just got some distortion, 76%. That's paired with just a simple sine wave as well for its sub. Over at effects for that one, got an OTT to bring out the mix, disperser, adding some weird kind of movement to it. I always add disperser to a lot of my basses just because it makes things sound a bit more exciting. A decapitator to bring out some of the harmonics we want, especially if it's going to stick out like we need it to. Pro R to make it sound like it's back in a room again. Formant filter, which if I put the mix the whole way up, you can see, which adds a bit of colour again. An EQ removing the lows, an EQ boosting some of the highs so we can like fully get that in the mix. And a thermal, which is just saturating it again, doing exactly the same as this EQ pretty much. But yeah, that's it for that one. Next we've got our foghorn bass, which is no more complex really. Again, just one patch. Got a mellow but unstable, which is one I love to use for foghorns because it's quite a simple sound, but it has enough like harmonic capability in it that you can use a peak filter to get something like this. So it's got a -2 octaves on that. A square saw, I'm assuming it means. I've got asymmetry just plus to negative on it, 100%. So if I roll it down, it sounds like that. It looks like that. If I bring it up, it looks like that. FM from B at 36. This LFO here, which is like modulates the size and shape of the foghorn on both the levels of both the wavetables and some white noise. And this filter over here, which the resonance is automated. Oh, that's horrible noise. As you can see, just peaks up when this LFO is activated. And that peak filter is the thing that gives the sound its like tone. It's everything. It's what makes it a foghorn. Without it, it sounds like this. Just does not sound right. And this is just like boosting this one specific peak. Changes it completely. Tube distortion at 87%. Chorus to make it wider. And that's actually it for that one. Again, paired with a sub. For different versions of this, like I have here, this is all purely done through pitch bending. And because the resonance is different on different pitches, it makes it sound like it's a completely different, like I'm doing some mad modulation to it. I'm really not, I'm just automating the pitch bend. Without this on, it just sounds like that. Yeah, for effects for this one, OTT again, as always, a little disperser again, some decapitator, Pro R could probably be almost be doing too much, to be honest. Pro Q boosting some of these highs because we want to bring out the sound, and just removing this frequency here, which is where the resonance is actually boosted. As you can see there, just because it adds some really muddy frequency if you listen. And like, obviously we need some of it, but we don't need a lot of it. So I've just ducked that a bit. So that foghorn presses the ceiling of this whole mix. If you look here, that's topping off at the roof, which is what we want. If it's quiet, has barely any saturation on it, it won't be reaching that. So got to try and squash it in sometimes, especially with EQ when you're shaping it in like that. Just a sidechain. Usually I wouldn't have one here because I only have this kick, but I loved like the shape it gave it on this bit because it changes over. Like on this section here, it adds like another like jump off at the end. So I just kept it in. But yeah, obviously this first one is being sidechained to this kick. Doesn't really clash much as it is. So I've just kind of made it a bit shorter. But yeah, that's it for the bass. Kind of seems a bit complicated, but then again, it's really not. Just a bit of like processing, which is always the case. I've actually got a Pro C on here as well, which is just gluing both these basses together almost. Just controlling the mix. I've got the attack at 10.7 milliseconds, release at 400 milliseconds, threshold at -10, the ratio is at 1.4. That's all just doing a bit of taming almost, just keeping it around -2 dB of compression. But yeah, that's it for the bass. We'll move on to the intro. Section 3, build up. BOU's intros are stylistically quite simple, using a pad or a melodic pluck to set the tone, then introduce a repeating hat before the build up and impending drop. In this instance, they used a soul sample and layered it with another long soulful vocal that played just before the drop. To make it my own, I also added a percussion loop that plays both in the intro and the build up section. Let's get straight into it. So I've gone for this like soul jazzy kind of fruit. When I started with this little like hip hop chop of a soul sample here. For some reason I thought it'd work, and it kind of does, in a bit of a surprising way. So I have this vocal here as well, which is I've just kind of chopped out of a sample. I've got some reverb automation, some delay automation. I'll show you here. I've got some auto tune as well to bring it into the key I wanted, because I had to pitch it up by 300 semitones as well. 300 cents, sorry. I've got some Pro R on it to put it back into a room. Some Fruity Reverb 2 reverb, and some Soothe to just tame the vocal a lot. That's it. I got some delay and stuff going on. We obviously have this little kick build up here. This is actually made unique, so it's separate from this kick, and I've turned it down by like a lot, just so it doesn't get in the way of everything. I feel like if you have a really obnoxious kick in the intro, it can put you off a bit. I've introduced these loops here to kind of like bring in the drop before it actually comes in, so it's slightly less surprising and weird, if that makes sense, because it probably will sound really weird if it drops straight from this like jazzy soul thing into some massive foghorn tune. So yeah, I just have this going on. And of course we've got some vinyl going on. If I wasn't going to have bird noises, I'd have to have vinyl. And our last little touch is this little part of an amen break, which full sounds like this. And then I've literally just dropped the boom. Just because it's really sharp and like snapping, it just comes in and catches you by surprise. At the end of this 8 bars, I've brought in back the main vocals and part of this atmosphere as well. Kind of keeps the energy up as it brings in this little hat loop as well, which speeds the whole thing up. That's basically the whole like roots of this track. In terms of master, what we've got going on here for a track like this, where we're trying to squeeze everything we possibly can in there in terms of loudness, I've got some compression going on to kind of tame the peaks. Doing around -2, which is what I want to be doing on a master really. Thresholds at -8.5, ratios at 1.46. The only rule I'd have when mastering a song in general, to be honest, is keep your ratio below to 1 to 2. Just because you're going to be compressing too much, and you don't want to be compressing too much on your master, or it sounds ridiculous. It sounds like this. And it just sounds ridiculous. Like everything's just been squashed like a tremendous amount. My attack is at 25 milliseconds and release is at 334, which is kind of an average little like starting point. So if ever want to use that and then just play around with the ratio and threshold and then come back to the attack and release, that's, I would say, is a better way of handling your master compression. This is also something you can do if you want to remove the low as an input into the compression, because like low frequencies take longer for compression to release because of science I can't really explain. It just does, trust me. You can activate this so the compression is more responsive, and that also makes it so you can add more compression and it doesn't have as much of an effect. Because I've activated that, I can now bring the threshold down. There we go, as you can see, that's working. We have this mid-side EQ here, cutting around 50, just we don't want any sub in the stereo. That's just doing its job. A free clip as always, but it's doing like cutting off at -2. We can see down here, all that red is just being flattened. We can even push for more. Does get a bit ridiculous after a while. Maybe 3.2 is enough. Then we come in with a limiter. Could maybe be pushing for a bit more than this actually, but I never really want to go over -8 dB of limiting, just because it then starts to sound a bit flat and a bit distorted. So this is as far as I pushed it. To get it louder, what you'd want to do is mess around with the mix in terms of how saturated things are and how genuinely loud things are, in terms of like bringing up mix and knobs here. This sounds like it could be a lot louder. Maybe I'd play around with this EQ, also with a mono compatibility. So if I went back to this, maybe this chorus would have to be altered. Just turned down a bit, perhaps. Also, the sub has a massive part to play. In how loud a song is. Usually if your sub's louder, the song is just like incredibly loud. We're now pushing. After you see that, after those adjustments, we've got another whole decibel out of that. Yeah, perfect. I have this megascope, as always now, because I love to check what the thing looks like in Rekordbox prior to putting it in there, just so you know if you're sending it out to the DJs or playing it yourself, it's going to sound good in the clubs, because if you're like breaching the tops and the bottoms of the visualizer, you know everything's slapping. And everything is like pushing the tops on that, so I'm really happy. But yeah, that's all, guys. Thanks very much for watching. As ever, if you'd like to see something, leave a comment down below. I'm thinking of doing a neuro video next, so let me know any specific artists you'd like me to cover. But yeah, I'll play this one out for you. Cheers, see you next time.